And apparently Rick Leonardi added a second one, which would be like spiders have spinnerets to form webs. That's what they spin their webs out of. But he made it a double spike instead of the other.
The evolution of the black costume visually did change over the first several months as different artists were handling it and as we just found out what worked. It was a challenge because you were basically working with a silhouette. As more and more people started handling the suit, people started to introduce highlights to contour the musculature a bit more. That actually read better to me, and that became a situation where they started putting blue on the highlight, so it actually became black, blue, and white. My understanding is that the initial idea was that the costume, as designed, was going to have a red spider on it, but because of the actual printing of the color, the red would show against the black. You know, you would see the blotch of the red ink into the black area, and it compromised the design of the character, especially on the smaller figures. So it was decided to keep the spider pristine and to keep it white.
When we came up with the idea for the black costume, we all knew it was a temporary thing, but we wanted to convince the fans and everyone else that it was going to be a permanent change. So we even redesigned our stationery and ran off a few thousand sheets of stationery and changed our business cards so that they now had the black costume on instead of the red and blue costume. We did this just as an extra hype to try to convince everybody that this was going to be a permanent change. And they bought it. Before the black costume saw print, rumors about it circulated among the fans, and they were outraged. We started getting bags of mail of people protesting. They hated the idea of Spider-Man changing his costume. They swore they would never buy another issue of Spider-Man again. They were going to protest Marvel Comics. You know, the company was going to go out of business. Among the creative community, a lot of the artists and writers also objected to the idea of changing Spider-Man's costume. It had worked for 25, 30 years. Why bother to change it?
I think a lot of fans were outraged. When you've got the perfect costume, why are you messing with it? I was just furious.
The fan backlash was very negative. You know, they were saying we're ruining the character, or why are we doing this?
Once Jim Shooter heard how people were reacting to the costume, he came in right away and told me, we've better get rid of this dog. He suggested that we introduce the costume in Amazing Spider-Man 252 and get rid of it in Amazing Spider-Man 253. I didn't like that idea at all. I suggested that instead of getting rid of it right away, we come up with a storyline that explains why Spider-Man can't keep this costume, and then we get rid of it. I also pointed out to Jim that Spider-Man wasn't supposed to actually even get the costume till the 8th issue of Secret Wars. So we had to hold it for at least 8 issues.
Tom felt, and I believe rightfully so, that we were obligated to hang on to it until they found out how he got it. So the compromise was that we'd keep it for at least 8 or 9 months, and then the month after he gets it in Secret Wars, then we could get rid of it.
This is the cover of Amazing Fantasy 15, the very first appearance of Spider-Man. And as you can see, this is a copy of the cover of the first issue of Amazing Spider-Man that featured the brand new costume. It's actually a homage of Amazing Fantasy 15, which was the first appearance of Spider-Man.
In Spider-Man 252, we just start the issue with him returning from the Secret Wars, and he's wearing a whole new suit.
Everybody hated the black costume before it came out in print. Once it came out in print, it was an amazing success. Suddenly, the bags of mail turned. Instead of telling us how much they hated the costume, all the readers were telling us how much they loved the costume. Of course, we got those letters 3 months into the storyline in which he's getting rid of the costume. It was decided that the new costume would have some special qualities. It had an unlimited source of webbing. It could mimic any appearance.
Peter Parker no longer had to find an alley and strip off his outer garb and put it in a web sack and carry it on his back or hide it somewhere. All he had to do was think about it, and this costume would look like civilian clothes.
Which, of course, made it very easy for Peter Parker to transform into Spider-Man and back whenever he wanted to.
If he wanted to put his little miniature camera onto his little belt that he carried it on, the costume would like flow open to allow him to click his camera on it, and it would flow closed again.
I kept looking at it, trying to figure out a reason why a costume could have these special qualities. And I came up with the goofy idea that it wasn't really a costume. It was actually an alien creature.
In issue 8 of the Secret Wars series, his red and blue costume is in tatters, and they discover this machine in this large structure that they're using as a base. And this machine pops out this black globe that molded around him, and he had this new costume.
Some sort of symbiote that merged with its host and drew upon the properties of the host.
What a symbiote in science is, it's an organism that seeks out another organism to function in tandem with. So the costume was indeed a living organism that needed a host, and Peter had become its host. It was psychically linked to him. Peter started having nightmares, and what he was discovering was that the suit was taking him out at night for a ride. He was asleep, but the suit would flow over him in his bed, and he would get up and swing around the city as Spider-Man. But he would wake up the next morning being exhausted, not knowing why 8 hours of sleep didn't refresh him. So it became a lot of fun because Spider-Man could get this really slick new costume that had all these different properties and have it somehow become a negative.
He found out ultimately that it was craving the Spider-Man action. It became a threat to him because it wanted to be on him all the time. It was an adrenaline junkie. At this point, it went from being a symbiote to more of a parasite, where it was actually taking more from him than it was giving back in return. You know, that's sort of the typical Peter Parker thing. You know, no matter how many things go right for him, something else goes wrong.
The Saga of the black costume was typical Peter Parker luck. He gets a brand new costume with all these wonderful abilities, and of course it's an alien symbiote that's trying to merge with him and become one with him. So he's got to get this thing off him as soon as he can.
That wasn't so easy because it was immune to his powers, and he couldn't sense it coming. You know, Peter has that spider sense that goes off when there's danger. It didn't work with the black costume, and so it really became a pretty serious threat.
Like everybody in the Marvel Universe, when you're not sure what's going on with your costume, you go to see the Fantastic Four. And he went and saw Reed Richards, and Reed Richards ran a bunch of tests, and the results of those tests were that the suit's alive. And Peter's reaction was pretty much what anybody's would be: get it off me! Because it wouldn't listen to him. It wouldn't leave him because it was threatened. So they found out that sonics and flame were the two things that would affect it and scare it. So they used sonics to get it off of Pete, and they corralled it into a jar, a scientific jar of some kind. And the Fantastic Four had it in its possession for quite a while.
During one point of his life, Peter Parker was dating one of his former supervillains, a lady by the name of the Black Cat.
She was a cat burglar, hence, you know, the Black Cat. She was running around the city at night, stealing things, and he was trying to stop her. He was trying to bring her to justice, but there was also some chemistry. And once he finally caught her, and once he had her, he didn't quite know whether he should turn her in or give her a big kiss. But of course, she had no question about it. She wasn't getting taken in either way. She didn't want to go to jail, and so she basically always found a way to get away from him. But at the same time, she was attracted too, and she actually ended up looking him up occasionally and getting together.
After the symbiote was written out of the story, the Black Cat came up with her own version of the black costume and presented it to Peter because she thought it looked sexier than his red and blue costume. Now, the real reason why this happened was the mail was so overwhelmingly positive for the black costume, we had to bring the darn thing back.
It was a hit. I mean, it became a fact of the day that if we had him in the red and blue costume, people loved the black costume, and if we had him in the black costume, they were asking for the red and blue costume. So we just started switching back and forth.
We would use the black costume when we had an action story.